Hello and welcome to the third episode of Steve and Dave's Song Stories. This time around, we're going to be talking about one of the big hits of the late, I guess, of 1960,
Yeah,
actually. Probably written in the 1959, but recorded in 1960, Puppy Love by Paul Anka. Steve, have any thoughts?
Puppy Love is well, let's face it, it's a bit cloying, but the
Saccharine?
saccharine.
Yeah.
It but there's an interesting set of stories that surround it, and it actually I think it's fair to say has been a very important song for two big performers. And the backstory of the song, which again is what we're really interested in, is quite interesting because it involves a Mouseketeer. So there's a lot here.
Indeed, some people would say the Musketeer. Um, uh,
Oh, I think that's
and,
fair. She was the breakout star.
and we're also talking about the classic story. In some ways, um, it may seem trivial. Uh, the people around this couple certainly saw it as a more trivial sort of thing. That's why the song was written.
That's right.
People did not
Yeah.
take their love seriously.
Well,
They called it a puppy love. Um, but in many ways, there are faint echoes of the classic love story of all time, Romeo and Juliet.
oh, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. And I do think that there is, even though the song is kind of awful in its own way, there's a certain universality to it that does ring true, I think, in the ears of many people. And so, yeah, so whether you're from Shakespeare to Paul Anka, I guess we begin. And so,
And
I guess
we certainly shouldn't stress that too much,
no. This is
but we're talking about a young couple that um, some parties are anxious to keep apart, right? To keep
yeah, that's right.
separated, and I think that's where the similarities end. Romeo and Juliet were a couple of years younger than our couple,
A
but
little
just
younger,
a
yeah, a
couple,
couple years,
yeah.
just a couple. But
Um,
yeah, it's well. Here we go. So it's the story of Paul Anka and Annette Funicello, and
exactly.
this takes us to I guess first to Canada in the late 1950s with one Paul Anka who is I think it's fair to say a kind of breakout star in the earliest days of rock and roll. He was a kind of boy wonder, a kind of teen idol, and
And he
a big
never
deal.
wanted to do anything else. From his youngest days, he was convinced, I'm going to make my living with music, and I can do it,
That's right.
and I want to do it, and I want to get started. Um, and he had to work on his parents for a couple of years until they got so sick of hearing it that his dad actually did send him to New York and says, "All right, go. But if you come back, that was your last chance." So he went to New York.
That's right. And if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And so I think it's fair to say that he had a gift, and we will make fun of this song often during the next few minutes. But I don't think there's much question about it that Paul Anka was then and now, I think, a gifted songwriter and a talented artist,
Yes.
and somebody who was ambitious and courageous in his own way. And he set out, as you're suggesting, on his own, and he did it. I mean, he did it in a business that is it's famously difficult. And he really becomes one of the early faces of popular music, of rock music.
Well, if you have this kind of this impervious
Yeah.
conviction that you
Yes.
are
Right.
God's gift to pop music, um, then you're deaf to all the no's that you're going to hear, all the rejection, These are people that don't know what they're talking about. That's all. They're just, and
That's right.
you're going to keep going until you find someone who realizes what a genius you are.
Well, so I mean, so a certain kind of irrational confidence, which is what you need. I mean, it's what you need. And I think what's really unusual about this is that he's a teenager. I mean, he's a kid, and he is really forging his own path.
He's
There,
what, 15 or 16 when he goes
yeah,
down to New York.
that's right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, you have a handful of people who had done this before him. I mean, Frank Sinatra would fit into this mold, but there just aren't that many young people engaging in this way as a kind of solo act. And again, what's
And
interesting about, go
he
ahead.
did not, Anka did not have the Godfather speaking for him, to, open up some doors in the
Well, that's
recording world.
well, that's right. And the other thing about Anka is that he's a writer. So in addition to his performing and his kind of boyish charm and good looks, I mean he's a writer, and so this will serve him in good stead for the rest of his life because as we've talked about before in many of our shows, it's publishing is where the money is in popular music, and so Anka has uh, made a name for himself in the publishing world in a number of
Yes,
interesting ways.
which we'll also talk about later.
So
Yeah,
we should. So let's think about then the muse. And so Anke is his career is underway, and roughly paralleling this in California, Walt Disney is assembling a group of young people um, to take on this new medium of television, and
as hosts.
as hosts. Yeah, it's a kind of well, it's the Mouseketeers, it's the Mickey Mouse
Mickey
Club,
Mouse Club.
and Walt Disney, who had this is the earliest years of Disneyland, and the empire of the Disney empire was shifting from just cinema to again theme park and to now television. But he really was investing a lot in these young people who he thought would be the kind of the face of the Disney empire. And well, Dave, you would just talk a little bit about young Annette Funicello and sort of how she made her mark on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Well, as a young girl, her parents, or at least her mother, was concerned that she was so shy, and to kind of work against that a little bit, she sent her to ballet school,
Right.
and and Walt Disney discovered her performing the lead role in Swan Lake when she was like 12, and she was the only musketeer that he handpicked. She's the only handpicked musketeer that Walt Disney said, "I want her in this," and
That's right.
and she remained his favorite like forever.
I think that's key. I think
Until his death.
that's a key point until his death in the 60s. She is the chosen one, and I think it's fair to say that even after she, I think, had an indifferent relationship with the Disney Corporation following the end of the Mickey Mouse Club, which ended pretty quickly because she was
After
then
3 years. Yeah.
after 3 years, really after so you have 2 full years, and you have a truncated third year, but then she's still under contract, and so she's appearing in a variety of Disney films, some of them kind of interesting and some of them quite terrible.
Her own series, Annette.
That's right.
She has guest appearances as two different characters in Zorro, and so on.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing is, even as a Mouseketeer, she stood out, and Disney was not the only one to notice her. She was the fan favorite from the word go. She was receiving 6,000 fan letters a month.
Yeah, she was.
So she was definitely head and ears above the rest of them.
There we go. Oh, we see what you just did there. It's yeah, and the Mouseketeers, the Mickey Mouse Club was in its own way kind of a big deal. It was in the early years of television, there weren't that many choices. And so if a show was a breakout show, like the Mouse Club was, then you were a big deal. You were you are a household name, you are a household face, and Annette Funicello was clearly the face, and it really launches in efforts for Funicello. But again, so the key piece of this is that Anka notices young Annette, and they their connection is Funicello, among other things, among her many talents, she's a singer, again, a singer of sorts. In her own mind, she wasn't a great vocalist, but this is what you did in the day, right? And so if you were a famous figure in television or movies, you also then would suddenly have a singing career. And so she cut a few singles and a couple of albums, including an album of Anka songs. And they become, as they say, become acquainted.
Well, okay, but that
But
album was recorded after they were already an item.
that's right.
Um, they actually met at she met Paul Anka at the same time that she met Frankie Avalon. That was at a dinner with the boys' manager, Irving Feld, who wanted to interest them in the possible participation in the Caravan of Stars tour, Dick
Yep.
Clark's
Dick
Caravan of
Clark's.
Stars.
That's right.
A completely new thing,
It
but
was.
as it turns out, brilliant. It was going to feed a need. And Annette was in it from the very beginning,
That's right.
from August 1959. And this was like a group of up to 17 rock stars. And they would all come out and they'd sing their hit or their two hits or whatever.
That's right.
And there would be a headliner, which Paul Anka was on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
These tours would go, well, the summer tour would go from like Memorial Day to Labor Day. And it's like 3 months of nonstop, one or two shows every day.
That's right.
A different city every day.
That's
So
right.
when it started off, the very first show was at the Hollywood Bowl, and it was a sold out show. It broke Hollywood Bowl attendance records. They turned away 6,000 kids.
Yeah, this is.
They went to let's see, I think it was Minnesota, and that was at the state fair.
Yep.
They broke attendance records there. There were 15,000 kids attended those shows, or that show rather. So it was clearly something that the kids were hungry for, right?
That's exactly right. Because Dave, this is the birth of youth culture, right? This is the birth of a kind of distinctive way of life, way of identification for teenagers. This is one of the features of life in the United States during the post-war years. This is the baby boom, a relative era of relative affluence. Young people have disposable income. Now they can watch these televisions that are coming into their homes. They can buy their own records. They can buy their own fan magazines. And suddenly, right, this Caravan just, again, it's a kind of genius move.
It really is
kind of a genius, and it really, I think, as you're suggesting, there was just this great hunger for it. And my Lord, the kids just came out in droves to see these. So they see this Caravan and then many others, right? This kind of thing would go on for another 15 years or so.
They would have a summer run and a fall run starting in October. And during the 7 years that Dick Clark was doing this, it would gross nearly $5 million a year. That's more than 45 million in 2021 dollars.
It's staggering. It's staggering numbers. It really is. And
but it also bordered on, well, I don't think I think bordered on is probably really too kind. It was exploitation of the
Oh,
rankest
100%.
story. You know, these people would be traveling in the buses uh, hours each day, and then expected to perform once or twice a night. Uh,
Yeah, it's
as I said,
I
7 days a week for months on end.
Oh, I think that's right. So, it's a state fair one day, it's a it's a shrine auditorium the next day, then it's on the back of a hay wagon the next day in a parking lot at a grocery store opening. It's grueling work. It's grueling work, but this is how the game was played back in the day, right? This is how you met the masses. And so Funicello and Anka are paired up in this, and there's a lot of downtime, right? There's a lot of downtime on these tours, right? You're backstage, you're on the bus day after day after day. And so um I think it's fair to say that they became acquainted. And I also think it's fair
No,
to say,
yes, they certainly became acquainted and spent a lot of time. Anka was not on the first tour,
right,
but from October on, he was, and they spent, of course, they spent a lot of time with each other, and
some of it unchaperoned, one assumes.
well, according to
Eh,
them, that never happened.
well, that's
Uh,
yes. There
and this was what here we have a picture of some of the stars, including Annette and Paul sitting together in
it's
their
unchaperoned to me.
in
But
their
yes.
in their incredibly luxurious bus seats.
Oh yeah, that does
So
look. Yeah, that's the height of luxury in the late 1950s, early 60s, I suspect. Yeah, these are grueling tours, but they have a lot in common. I mean, being this life is it's a difficult life. It's not shared by many, and so the idea of interacting with fans, the pressure of performing, all of that. I mean, they had a lot of common ground, and again, we shouldn't underestimate the fact that she was a big deal in this year.
it was a big deal. This
She
and
was a big deal.
I think it's fair to say um, that this was really the first it couple, at least in the pop world, in
Probably so.
the
Probably so. Yeah.
teen world, um, and so of course that captured the imagination of the fans too.
Oh, 100%. No, you got that right. That's right.
So
Exactly.
so when Puppy Love came out, um, most people were in on the story. They knew who he had written it for,
That's
and
right.
that
Yeah.
was something that they found fascinating.
Yeah, that is a key point, Dave, because obviously over the years, the link between Anka and Funicello has, become less familiar. And so people still know the song, but the story behind the song, I think, is somewhat of a mystery to most people today. But I think you're right. Back in the day, oh, he's singing about Annette. And
Yeah.
then people found that just, I think, incredibly charming and just endearing as I'll get out.
Well, why don't we say a little bit about the content of the song? I mean, we've
Okay. If
walked
we
around
have
it a little
to.
bit, but
All right. All right. Yeah. So the content of the song,
um,
you,
they,
yeah.
there were people, um, well, including folks at Disney, uh, including um, managers, um, parents.
Yes.
There were a lot of people who
Yes.
were not wild about this.
That that is exactly right.
And when you're selling a teen idol like Paul Anka, it's in everybody's interest to have a single guy that young girls can fantasize about having a relationship with.
Well, I think that's 100. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That this
And if
is
he's taken, well, then you're taking, yeah, all sorts of potential income even. Well, if we can't listen to
oh,
Paul and have Paul, let's go listen to Ricky or
yeah.
uh, Frankie Avalon or whatever, you know.
That's exactly right. Because if Paul and Annette are an item, and if he's singing about Annette, then he's taken. And again, this is an era where teenagers would wed. I mean, it was that wasn't. So when you maybe you may be a couple, and so this isn't some sort of passing fancy.
Well,
And so yeah, you're right. He was thrilled by this.
so
Thrilled by
it
the
was
story working
forbidden
out.
for them to date
Yes. Yes.
as long as she was 16.
Oh gosh, yeah.
When she turned 17, they were allowed to see each other, but Paul Anka described it as a Victorian situation because they were always chaperoned, and he said he came up with a little trick to kind of help them get a little bit of private time where they could lock lips, is his expression. And he would get one of his pals to get her mother involved in a card game. So they'd be playing cards in the next room, and he and Annette could get a little bit hot and heavy, more so than they would normally be able to do right in front of her mother.
Candidly, I don't know what I'm more shocked about. The lip locking or the card playing. Both of them seem problematic. My goodness. Debauchery all around. But yeah, so they're hatching a plan. They're genuinely fond of each other. This isn't some sort of PR stunt. This isn't some sort of some sort of wacky caper cooked up by Walt Disney or cooked up by the record companies. They actually have a kind of connection, and that's interesting.
So
here we go.
Yeah, this is
Denver.
Yes, this is not from the Caravan. This was from a television special with Pat Boone. We'll include this in the playlist, but it's a cringe-worthy moment. All right.
Oh yeah.
This couple is now, it's a known quantity. As I said, it's an it couple. Paul and Annette. So they have a little date on this show, and Paul says, "Well, no, I'm sorry." Pat Boone says, "Well, Annette's over there, and we probably have a little time. She's getting ready, so we probably can talk here for half hour or so." And Paul said, "I'm going to go see if she's ready," and she was ready, and so they walk out and they start singing to each other.
Oh God.
From The Sound of Music. You are 16 going on 17.
Oh, yes. Well, how about that?
Which it's just, it's dead on. It's
a little too on the nose.
It's a little too dead on. Yeah. So anyone who wants to see it can check out the playlist. We will include that.
Wow. And you'll get some sort of medal for bravery. It's an interesting picture though, because you also then have the great Frankie Avalon, who will then become another important figure in Funicello's life post Anka. So, well, it's a small world at this point.
I just want to tease this right now. Maybe not just post Anka.
Whoa.
But we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Whoa. Wow, this is you talk about song stories.
All right. But here's the thing.
Okay.
There were a lot of people trying to keep them apart for various reasons, and trying to keep them from getting too close together. I think her parents probably had as much to do with that as anyone.
That's my sense of it as well, right?
Because if Annette gets pregnant, Paul's career isn't over, but hers is, right? I mean,
well, yeah. I mean,
it's 1960.
Yeah,
she's no longer going to be considered a viable celebrity if she gets pregnant out of wedlock. So So there were a lot of people that were trying to put the brakes on. And Paul's manager said to him, you know, you're kids, and kids go through this sort of thing. It's an infatuation, it's puppy love. And he didn't
Well,
feel like he was being taken seriously or like they were being taken seriously.
oh, it feels like a song is starting to kind of emerge here.
So
Oh,
even though we're 17,
oh yes,
you know, we know what love is,
we
and
do.
we're
Oh yeah,
experiencing it. And it's not just puppy love. It's that's what the song is about. People who are just
that's
not
right.
taking them seriously,
That's right.
who are trying to put the brakes on, and just don't understand what they're going through and how they feel for each other.
And again,
And
yeah,
Annette absolutely said the same thing. She said we were 17, but we were in love.
yeah, I think right. I mean, it was a real relationship. There was a real chemistry. They had a bond. I don't think there's much doubt about it. And they affirmed this long after the relationship ended, that this was real. This wasn't some sort of cooked up stunt. So
Let me read a bit longer passage from an interview that she gave back in the day. She's talking about this first meeting with Paul and Frankie Avalon, and about the relationships that grew out of that. So here, quote:
yeah.
um, "I never met two boys so entirely different. Paul sat there most of the evening with his head down, as if he were afraid to look up. The great Paul Anka, who already had 8 gold records.
Yeah.
Why, he's shy, I remember thinking, and could hardly believe it. But Frankie, who looks so frail, or maybe I mean girl shy, isn't at all. He has a direct approach and a natural quality about him that is wonderful. I know when Mr. Feld asked me if I'd like to be on the Dick Clark show, I was too stunned to answer. Frankie laughed with me, not at me. So I came to know Frankie better, and I began to realize he was the sweetest boy I had ever met. He made me feel gay and happy. Where Paul is kind of stormy and unpredictable, Frankie's always the same. His straight out approach with girls is wonderful. For instance, he'll telephone me and, with no fussing about it, he'll ask for a date. But Paul, who really looks aggressive, isn't that way at all. Paul's emotions seem to get in the way. Look, I don't want jealousy or anything else to come between me and Paul, but the truth is, I like aggressive males. I want a boy to come after me. I don't want to keep smoothing the way. I'm so fond of Frankie that I can't help but compare him and Paul. For instance, when Frankie comes to pick me up for a date, he'll notice right away what I'm wearing. If it's a new and becoming dress, he'll say, "Gee, you look wonderful." Paul never does. And yet, deep inside, I know
Oh,
he's pleased with the way I look.
oh, he's pleased. Yes, deep inside.
Frankie never asks me about my other dates or where I've been. Paul does, and we both suffer over it. I've found Paul needs attention, a lot of it, and all of the time. He refused to answer the phone once when I tried to explain why I couldn't make one of his shows. Um, my ideal man would be a mixture of both Paul and Frankie, I guess. A boy with Frankie's looks and fabulous personality, and Paul's wonderful understanding. A boy who, like Frankie, could laugh when it's time to laugh, like Paul, be serious when it's time to be serious. I know that Paul and I certainly have been through a year I wouldn't have missed for the world. It's been sweet, bittersweet. End quote.
Wow.
Wow,
Well,
right?
well, I mean, maybe the whole with the connection with Shakespeare was not overblown. I mean, that's deep.
That's deep and dramatic. Well, and for all, I think it's very surprising when we were dating, and that wasn't terribly long after right? It was just 20 years later. So
Yeah.
um, if you were going steady with someone,
Oh, that was
it wasn't, they weren't just your best boyfriend or your best girlfriend.
this was
It
the
was
yeah,
exclusive,
it
right?
was exclusive. The door was locked
And that was understood.
100%.
But apparently it was different back then. And even talking about the
Apparently.
like the Beach Boys talking about I Get Around, it wouldn't be fair to have a best girl because you'd have to leave her home on a Saturday night to hang out with the guys.
Right. Because you wouldn't do that. You
Right.
wouldn't do that,
But
right?
a
Because
best
that's
girl, this is you're going steady, you're seeing each other steadily, but apparently it's not an exclusive thing. I mean, if you understood this interview the same way I did, she was seeing other guys, or at
well,
least Frank
yeah,
Gallagher.
and I think that's my reading of it as well. And that's my sense of it. If having read about her family, um, is that this is also what they wanted. That right, that her family was not particularly comfortable with Annette in a kind of a steady relationship. There's the story about that she went steady with someone for a short time, like a couple of hours, and there was a ring involved, and then parent pulled the ring off her finger. I mean, I think this is what they wanted. It's yeah, I mean, Avalon was yeah. I mean, she connected with him as well. It's
Well, all
is
right. Annette Funicello was clearly, ask anyone, um, a friendly, um, outgoing person who treated everyone well. Everyone who knew her loved her. Her
oh,
fans
I think
loved
that's
her,
universal. I think you're
right?
right.
And
Absolutely.
Paul Anka, on the other hand, um, maybe wasn't such a sweetheart. Um, one one hears things that, at least on occasion, he could be something of an asshole.
Well, yeah, more problematic personality. I mean, um,
And
yeah, more difficult person. I think that's fair.
and he was a jealous guy. And if I was in a relationship with a woman
Careful.
and read that interview, I think I would have every reason to feel somewhat threatened. So,
Well, that's yeah. There's that in its own way. It's extraordinarily candid. To, almost to her detriment, and I mean, but yeah.
so
But yeah,
anyway,
yeah. So Funicello was yeah. So Funicello was America's sweetheart, um, and the relationship with Anka was complicated, maybe more complicated than people would guess. It was
but but
there was
but she,
definitely
in spite of all that I just read, she would have said, "He's my guy. I'm in love with him." So, in the end, that's probably the most important thing.
I think that's fair. Yeah,
But we're also talking about a relationship of a very limited time frame, right? I mean, it didn't last long. We're looking at about a year, about 1960, right?
I think that's yeah, and in its totality, yeah, we're talking about a year.
And beyond that,
Well, beyond that, yeah, they're passing acquaintances. I mean, whatever.
yeah, they each go their own way. They're each working on their own careers.
So they are, and they have. I mean, and they have fine careers in their own way, right? So,
And,
um,
and this is one of the things that I was really curious about doing the research on this. Why did it end? How did it end? Who ended it? Did did those thoughts occur to you? Did you have any of those questions?
I wasn't burdened by them. No, but tell me more. Tell us more.
Well, all right.
I don't know. I don't have any sense of this. How it ended.
Some of the conventional wisdom is um, she wanted more than he did from this. She wanted marriage and family.
Oh, I see.
and he wanted to continue with his career and knew what it would mean to continue with her and had to break it off. But from the same interview, just a couple more words from
And I cannot wait for that.
from Annette.
All right.
Quote, "It is true that lately I've been asking myself if I think I'd be happy married to someone like Paul. And I decided no. You see, Paul loves his work more than anything. At least he does now. Of course, I don't know what he'll be like when he's older, but I want a husband who loves me more than anything. And I don't want to marry anyone connected with show business. I want to marry a businessman, a lawyer maybe, because I think it's very seldom that two people in show business get along as man and wife. And I'd like to try combining marriage with a career, though I'd give it up if my husband wanted me to. I'd give it up to raise a big family. But that's all a long way off, and it's even silly to talk about now. I'm only 17, and life, as some of the kids would say, is real cool. Lots of boys, and that's what I decided. I want to have lots of fun before I get serious and settle down." End quote.
You know, that is, well, a lot there again. That's actually sort of then becomes her modus operandi in terms of her career, right? That this is the 60s. Annette Funicello is part of the 60s because of her connection with Frankie Avalon and with all these surf pictures, these beach pictures.
Yes, that defines her decade.
That defines her decade. And so in a way, it's a kind of what she's suggesting there's a kind of career path.
Well,
kind of.
Possibly.
Yeah.
The fact is, she's not less interested in continuing her career, and is worried about what it would mean to be involved with someone else who was in the same thing.
That's exactly right. That's it's, which again, this is the very early 60s, and that's radical.
It is.
It's proto-feminist.
Just the idea, I'd like to be married and continue with my career. That's what I want.
Right. That's what I want. Yeah. And I mean, that's Annette Funicello, feminist.
Well, okay.
In a way.
And trailblazer. And
trailblazer.
Not glass ceiling breaker. Her hit. Okay, let's talk a little bit about her music career.
Oh, yeah, this won't take long. Go ahead.
It won't take long, but it is fairly fascinating, actually. Starting off, her material was provided by the Disney people, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And her singing career was fan initiated. As you suggested, she didn't see herself as a great singer. And she credited her producer, Salvador Tutti Camerata, with making her singing palatable, right? He double tracked things, gave her voice a little bit more depth, a little bit more strength. And so added a bit of echo. And after a while, other people started copying the so-called the Annette sound.
That's right.
Some studio magic, right? Echo chambers, double track, blah,
that's
blah,
right.
blah.
She's a bit of a studio creation in terms of her recording career. I think that's fair. Yeah.
But in 1958, she sang a waltz tempo ballad called "How Will I Know My Love?"
Yes.
From her TV series, the Annette TV series.
Annette show, yeah.
Disney received so much mail that the studio decided to press it as a record and had to give her a recording contract, somewhat reluctantly.
Well, this is right. This is she's actually. I think that's her relationship with with Disney is complicated, right? Because They
Especially
had
the business part,
the
certainly.
business part of it because they had a certain kind of mold, they had a certain kind of expectation, and she sort of exceeded it in a way, and
Yes.
she pushed boundaries in a little, and they had to deal with her um as a star, and I think that wasn't not
I
everybody
think
was comfortable
part of
with
the
that.
reason that that worked is because she had a close personal relationship with Walt Disney,
Well, she was, yeah, she was the twinkle in the old man's eye. I don't think question about that. Like you
right?
said earlier, she, the one hand picked Mouseketeer, and the old man Walt was still, calling some shots in the '60s, and yeah, so you couldn't, yeah, right, they were gonna do her wrong.
But in 1958, she also recorded singles that the Sherman Brothers, uh, uh, powerhouse
Yes,
songwriting pair from the Disney studios, who wrote songs for things like Mary Poppins,
yes.
Jungle Book. Um,
Oh, yeah,
they wrote
enormously
It's a
influential.
Small World.
Mhm.
Um, but they also did things for the non-Disney people, like for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Big names in
Yeah,
songwriting. But
absolutely.
she broke things open for them. They were not big names before Annette. They were not even big at the Disney studios before Annette. And that's the wild thing about it. They call her their lucky star because um, when she recorded Tall Paul,
Oh God.
it
Oh,
was
oh,
it
yeah.
rocketed to number 7 in
Oh God.
1959.
Tall Paul.
Tall
Yeah.
Paul, it was the first top 10 hit by a woman in
Now
pop
hang on.
music. The
Oh,
first top 10 hit
yeah.
by a
Okay.
woman, 1959, written by the Sherman Brothers. And so that broke things open for
Mm.
them too. Actually, the ex Mouseketeer, Judy Harriet,
Mhm.
was supposed to sing it because she had a voice. She was a vocalist. She really could sing,
Yeah, but she wasn't a net.
but she wasn't Annette. So
Tall Paul.
Tall Paul, and
Oh
that's so it's
God, this
so
is so bad.
ironic because she ends up with a Paul who isn't at all tall. He's 5'6".
Man, from the pages of Tiger Beat, this is unbelievable. 5'6",
5'6",
but
and
he's tall
suffered.
inside.
Yes, he is, but he certainly suffered from that. Tall Paul was her first big hit. It was followed by
Oh yeah.
other singles such as "Oh Dio Mio," which also broke the top 10,
Yeah, it did.
and "Pineapple Princess."
Oh, it did. Oh God, that's right.
Pineapple Princess, which just missed the top 10, peaked at
Oh,
number
listen.
11.
But top 10 still top 10 in my heart for sure.
She
Oh
so
God.
that was
Yeah.
those songs were well, at least Tall Paul and How Will I Know My Love, they were on the Annette album. That was followed by Annette Sings Anka,
Yes.
where she just sings
Hmm.
just all Anka songs. And they worked together on some of those at the piano in her parents' home in Cinco. Uh, so they even collaborated a little bit, and that was her best-selling album of the 12 she made. So
An even dozen.
an even dozen, and just
The Annette Funicello collection. Look,
unreal,
soon to be
unreal.
reissued, I'm sure, with unreleased demos and whatnot.
So
Yeah, she was a.
Musketeer, a TV actress for Disney,
That's right. She was.
singer, and finally, 1960 was basically the end of her career as a singer. I mean, they nothing she did after that really awoke any interest.
All good things must come to an end. In
But
the
by that
end.
time, she was Frankie Avalon's partner at the beach party.
Well, this is so. This, I mean, I think for many people, it's the it's the beach movies, right?
Right.
Of which there were several. They're all basically the same. Um, Fun in the sun,
How can
wacky.
you say that?
Well, there are some in their own way. They're sort of nuanced, but it's but they become kind of America's kind of a kind of couple, kind of cinematic couple.
Oh yes,
They're very much linked in the popular imagination. I think maybe even today, although she's been gone
Frankie
for
Avalon
a
has a
decade.
charisma to match hers, right? I mean, they really
Oh, they both, yes,
they
they both
work
popped
as a
on the screen.
couple. If you're
Mhm.
going to watch a couple together, I'd much rather watch Frankie Avalon with Annette than Paul Anka with Annette. Um, the
Uh,
2 minutes I
yeah,
spent watching Paul Anka with Annette were painful.
well, that seems a little harsh, the but the beach movies, um, really, I think cemented her identity in popular culture,
Yeah.
and they have a. I mean, it's so odd because the '60s are this incredibly tumultuous decade, a decade defined by really radical change in almost every aspect of American life. But there's also then this there's also this kind of just and something inane about the '60s and some of the some of the popular culture that's just almost inexplicable. But surf culture it caught the eye of many Americans, and so they was, if you will, kind of rode the wave, and so she becomes part of America, the kind of the cultural fabric of American life at this point.
Ooh, 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 ooh. Check out her bikini.
Yeah, it's not her navel is hidden.
And why is that?
Well, I know that was this Disney?
Yeah.
Somebody was concerned about. I think it was Disney
About her image. Yeah.
about her image, and so back in the day, the navel was considered to show the navel. It was kind of it was a kind of a line. I Dream of Jeannie, Barbara Eden, in the initial. I mean, there's the whole question about what would Jeannie's costume cover her navel or not, and so yeah, the navel was uh, yeah a critical point
And
in this
out
era.
of respect for him,
Yeah, well,
she didn't.
right. I mean, it is fair to say, right?
I think her producers in the movie
Oh well,
would
yeah,
have loved to show a
that's
little bit
absolutely right.
more stylistic,
And
more fashionable bikini than what she had on there. That's your grandmother's bikini.
well, that's right. It is your grandmother's bikini, but Walt Disney is probably the most important person in her life in a way,
Yeah.
and she respected him. And so, if that's if yeah, and so Funicello and Frankie Avalon,
I would suggest that one
yeah,
reason that these beach movies were so popular is because of everything else that was going on in the decade and everything else that was
kind
going
of
on with the
okay,
kids and flower power and hippies. This was
welcome,
really,
okay,
really wholesome in comparison.
welcome respite kind of deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people were hungry for that and wanted to
Well,
be able to say, "Oh, well, where are my kids going? Well, they're going to go to the beach
and,
park. God damn it! You know, they're
and
not going to."
that's right, and it is the case in the U.S. in the '60s. We've talked about this in a number of shows. That as much tumult as there was in the country, you had as many people, if not more, seeking to hang on to a kind of status quo, right? That the way things used to be wasn't so bad in the eyes of many Americans, and so the beach movies, I think, also would appeal to those folks who would see,
The funny
had
thing
enough.
about it is, 10 years earlier, those would have been fairly shocking movies.
Oh, no question. There
You
was
know,
a certain,
like
yeah,
like a
lot, right.
decadence. What are our kids up to?
Decadence, yeah, a lot of skin, a lot of dancing,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
yeah, a lot of unchaperoned time, all that. You're right, but I mean, in what's happening in comparison to what's happening in the larger culture, these beach movies are,
Yeah.
geez, I mean, they're just incredibly tame and incredibly lame in a way. But that's sort of the point.
Why don't we finish up
Yeah.
talking a little bit about Anka himself as a songwriter and producer of hits, and the cover of this song.
Which is, I think, the song, yeah, which I think, right, the cover is the song, the version of the song that I think most people today know, even though itself is over 50 years old. Yeah, so Anka, an incredibly prolific songwriter and also a performer of note. It's, um, I suppose, we should probably talk about this here. That one of Anka's most important contributions to American popular culture was writing the theme to a talk show, and that's the Tonight Show theme. Johnny Carson from the early '60s until the late 20th century was a dominant figure on late night television. His show, which aired 5 nights a week, first for 90 minutes and then later for just an hour, was a star making vehicle. I can think probably alongside the Ed Sullivan Show, and so it really was late night, and so this is the only thing that was really viable in the late evening, and so the Tonight Show theme, everybody in the country in that era could hum the Tonight Show theme, and that was Anka, right? That was Paul Anka.
Yeah, and that had originally been a song that was rewritten once with new lyrics as "It's Really Love" for Annette to sing, and then stripped of its lyrics, it became the Tonight Show theme, which earned him a buttload of money.
Well, that's right. Yeah,
with royalties, right? It was playing 5 times a week.
That's right.
For 30 years, something like that.
Yeah, 30 years. We're talking about, right. It was yeah, it was just, and it was also just sort of embedded in American culture. I mean, when you thought of Johnny Carson, you thought of that theme. It was just
Right.
they were one and the same, and so, but the teen, right, the teen idol transition, I think, is a difficult one for most performers. It certainly was difficult for Anka. That is to say that the hits to some degree kind of dried up for a time, but
all right, we definitely need to talk about how he transitioned to a later career, but let's talk about his very early career first, because that's also kind of fascinating. He was 15 when he went to New York, and like right out of the start box, he comes up with a huge hit, which catapults him just overnight to the status of teen idol. And that's Diana, right? He wrote that single was for years and years the second best-selling single, right behind White Christmas.
That's
best-selling
astounding.
single of all time.
That's astounding.
It really is. It was released in 1957. I don't know how many years it went, but wow.
Yeah.
And
right.
So he was immensely successful right from the very beginning.
Oh, he certainly was. There's no doubt about that. Immensely successful.
And he had by the time he had turned 18, he already had 5 top 20 hits under his belt. And other gold records beyond that, which didn't break into the top 20, but you didn't need to get a gold record back in the day. Top 40 was enough for a lot of records to achieve the gold status, because
definitely
the youth audience was so huge at that time and so hungry for new material.
Yeah, that's right. And it was a monolithic youth audience basically at this point, right? And so if something was in the top 40, that's really what most young people were listening to. The audience for rhythm and blues and for country was much smaller in this era. So if you were present on the pop charts, you were everywhere, radio, the whole deal.
It's interesting to note that he had actually toured in England and Australia with Buddy Holly, and he wrote a song for Buddy Holly, which Holly recorded very shortly before his death. It Doesn't Matter Anymore.
It's a terrific song, one of Holly's best.
And Anka says, "It Doesn't Matter Anymore" has a tragic irony about it now. but at least it will help look after Buddy Holly's family. I'm giving my composer's royalty to his widow. It's the least I can do.
Sure. I
Okay.
mean, that says a lot. It also was famously covered a couple of decades later by Linda Ronstadt. It's yeah, and so, but again, as you're suggesting, I mean, it's a small the pop music world is a small one, and so the key figures probably knew each other, maybe toured together, maybe recorded each other's songs. It was, and Anka was right in the middle of that. It doesn't last forever for him though, in that regard.
He spent many years living in Europe, and during that time, he heard a song on French radio,
Yes.
and the lyrics were, yeah, fairly trivial. He said, pretty standard fare for the French.
Like that.
I woke up and had a cigarette. I love the smell of your underarm. But the
Yeah.
music really stuck with him, and he secured the rights. And Frank Sinatra was looking for some new material, and Anka said this was on one of the 15 times that he was doing a last tour. So he was trying to come up with something, and with this idea of the last tour. Well, now the end is near, and so I faced the final curtain.
Yeah.
And that became, of course, My Way.
Yeah, this is, and then My Way then becomes sort of the late career. It's the defining song in Sinatra's September period, right? That This is the My Way. I think probably becomes in many ways his most loved song. There's a certain majesty to it that really, I mean, it just really connected with Sinatra. That fit his persona in a way, and to some degree, sort of Sinatra lived it. And so,
those are fairly brilliant lyrics.
there's no question. This is, I mean,
did a really great job on
that. By no stretch, despite the fact that Puppy Love is horrendous. By no stretch are we trying to undermine Anka's talent. I mean, he's one of the gifted writers of the late 20th century. I don't have a question about that. That he is some of his material is, people be listening to My Way, for decades. I mean, this is an incredibly important song.
Well, there was another star who had a go at writing the English lyrics for My Way.
Oh,
yeah, and that was David Bowie.
Yeah,
they didn't go with his lyrics, but
no, I mean, hard, really hard to believe in a way, but
okay. So he provided Frank Sinatra with one of his signature hits.
That's right.
But was not producing a whole lot of hits himself anymore.
Those days seemed to be over, right? Anka as stage performer and kind of pop star, it seemed to be over.
And then we're talking about mid-70s.
Yeah, mid-70s, early to mid-70s. It caught, I think, everybody by surprise. This kind of renaissance, the renaissance in terms of, again, a performer. I mean, I think he was a writer of substance and was still really important.
Well, in terms of just performances, I mean, he was
he's Mr.
selling out shows at Vegas and things like that.
He's Mr. Vegas, no question. Yeah,
had like a $6 million contract with one of the casinos so he was still performing and had a very successful act, right?
That's exactly right. But as a pop star on the top 40 on kind of contemporary radio, I mean, Anka's days seem to be done.
Right.
And then he comes up with a number of songs in this era, the 70s. One of them is its own way kind of controversial at the time. I think we sort of lose sight of that a bit, but um, Having My Baby, with so it's Odetta Coates, is that right? The
I think that's right. Yeah.
it was was a song that seemed to sort of, to some degree, sort of fly in the face of some of the cultural changes that were afoot. This is the era of Roe v. Wade, and this is decidedly kind of, if you will, sort of pro-life pop song, of which, that was unusual in this era.
Well,
Um,
especially because there was this line,
yeah,
you're showing me how much you love me, because you didn't have to do it.
right. You
You
didn't have
didn't
to do
have
it.
to have my baby.
Could have
So
swept it
that's
from your life. Yeah, that's, that says a lot. I mean, it's in its own way, it's very political. It's very political, and so, but he has a couple of other hits with Coates. He also has this song at the time. It was a jingle for Kodak. Um,
mm-hmm,
Times of Your Life.
mm-hmm.
And then he kind of fleshes it was a song that was part of a Kodak commercial. And for those of you who, Kodak was a film company, one of the world's largest film companies, and really sort of perfected the notion of the camera for ordinary people. And also then the genius of Kodak was not only they did manufacture cameras, but they manufactured film. And so the Kodak had you, and then they also were a key developer in terms of film. Back in the day, you have to send film in. And so they had the whole business. And so this Times of Your Life then becomes a kind of nostalgic, kind of a dewy-eyed hit as well for Anka. And so he has sort of he reemerges in the 70s as a kind of viable kind of pop star, appears on the Midnight Special and things like that. I mean, he's back. Paul Anka is back. But okay, so the cover of Puppy Love, though, right, is, again, it's probably the song that is the version most people are familiar with. And into the conversation enters one Donny Osmond. The Osmonds, right, had been a family act. They actually had a connection with Disney as well, right? They performed at amusement parks in Southern California, Knott's Berry Farms, and I believe they performed at Disneyland too. They were
They
a
appeared
family act.
together with Annette back in the early 60s.
Yeah, yeah, it's just, the young family acts were quite the rage in this time. And so the youngest of the boys who would perform at the time was Donnie. He was several years younger than Marilyn, Wayne, and Jay. And
I think he was 13 in 72, something like that.
yeah, something like that. And so he's considerably younger. The Osmonds, we've talked about the Osmonds at some length in previous chart show programs, but the Osmonds were, again, this kind of unified act. But then in the very early 70s, then they start to sort of push Donnie forward. Donnie Osmond has been pretty candid in his commentary that this wasn't really necessarily his idea, that this was coming from producers, particularly Mike Curb, and he was, in his own words, I think, embarrassed about being put in front of his brothers who had been at this a long time and a lot longer. Frankly, he felt like a bit of a junior member, a kind of latecomer to the group, and then suddenly he's now the focus. He's the lead Osmond. He has a couple of big hits, including "Go Away, Little Girl," which his version of that, which gets to number one. But it's Puppy Love, right? It's Puppy Love in 1972 that I think really deeply connected with his legion of fans. Most of them were, many of them were prepubescent girls, teeny boppers, if you will. And he becomes, he is enormously popular in the early 70s. It's just
when we're talking about
mind-blowing in a way.
adolescent girls fantasizing about getting together with pop idols, here you're looking at someone who's just as old as they are. I mean, or a couple of years older. He's a kid. And
He's a kid.
I think he was 13 years old when he sang Puppy Love.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so this is one of the features of we'll have this in the playlist, and so listen to it if you're bold enough. One of the features of Osmond's version of Puppy Love is the plaintive cries
Help
of
me, please,
help me, please, which was apparently sort of he was urged to do this by the record producer Mike Curb, who thought this would really give the song some real juice.
It was
The
in
song,
it was in the original too, and the thing with
but
that is,
but
Anka said, he felt this was came out of his own feeling of despair, and was for him a really legitimate
well,
sort of thing, and that's why he included it, because it came from within.
and that may well be, but for young Donny Osmond, this was a kind of a gimmick, I think.
Yes, it caused his fanship to swoon collectively.
Oh my gosh! And so the song reaches number 3 in 72, but this is, I think, the song that the solo Donny Osmond is most associated with, and it becomes a kind of, I think it's fair to say, a kind of albatross. He really, I mean, many of his songs when he was, he continued, his career continued on and still continues. And he sang those songs, he sang them, he delivered, but he really hated Puppy Love. He really just didn't care for it at all.
Well, in the early 80s, he talked to a good friend of his, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, that's right.
Who was enjoying a huge comeback.
That's right. His kind of his own kind of renaissance. Yeah, that's right.
And he said, I can't find footing anywhere. I can't get the time of day from a record company. What the hell? Yeah. What's going on? And Michael Jackson said, well, it's because your name is Donny Osmond.
Yeah, this is quite a story. Yeah.
And Donny Osmond is the Puppy Love guy. And that's not what Michael Jackson said, but that's what he meant. Yeah. And so yes, I think he blamed this in part for not being able to be taken seriously as an adult.
I think that's right. I think he almost squarely puts his fading from the popular consciousness squarely on the shoulders of this song, Puppy Love. And so for a long time, he just didn't want to perform it, and he would leave it out of his shows, and to the dismay of his fans. And then, right, you want to talk about the time though that he whatever, sort of juiced up the song a little bit. And so, okay,
had a meltdown.
Had a meltdown. So the fans wanted it, so they're going to get it.
They're going to get it.
So the version of Puppy Love that he delivered then was a kind of up tempo, if not kind of heavy metal version.
Heavy metal, or even like punk. So just high tempo, snarling. It wasn't even a
snarling. Yes,
it wasn't even a parody. It was just tore the song apart, essentially.
That's right.
And he said, I was accosted by one of the fans after the show, who said, how could you do that to Puppy Love? And he said, it's my song. I'll sing it the way I want. And she said, well, the people who are here tonight listening to you grew up with that song, and it meant a lot to me and to these other people. It's not just your song, it's our song too. And he said that really opened his eyes.
That's a big
that really made sense to him. And he's come to peace with Puppy Love. He said, it made me who I am, and I have a lot to be thankful for. And so I think that was the moment that really opened his eyes to the fact that.
And I think that's and I think that's one of the interesting things about music, is that the way, and I think it's why we were drawn into music as well, that we these songs are not, there are songs too, right, that they speak to us in a very specific way. They are kind of soundtrack to our lives. We we have a real emotional connection to them that's deep and it's lasting. And so, right, when he had that confrontation with the fan, and I think it opened his eyes to that. And
Yeah.
I think it does speak to a kind of truth. So the song itself is, marginal at best.
Okay,
But there's a,
we should mention. You said it got up to number 3 with Donny Osmond. It
that's right.
got up to number 2 when Anka sang it. So this
That's
is a
right.
song that was incredibly successful twice. Never hit number 1, but boy, what he must have earned with that. It was
Oh,
blocked
sure.
by the theme to Summer Place when Anka
Mhm.
released it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Well, Anka has done just fine, thank you, in terms of his career, because he's written a number of hits
it's
for himself and others.
yeah, it's hard to imagine what he must be worth these days.
Yeah, he's done well for himself, for sure.
Yeah,
And given how this all started for him, it's really quite a remarkable journey. So it's funny, there's, like with all these songs, there's a lot. The backstory is surprisingly interesting, and even though the song may not be all that, there's still there's a lot there. There's a lot
before we
there.
finish up here, we should just mention Paul Anka is still alive.
And he
Annette
is
Funicello is no longer alive.
right.
She died in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think past, decade or so ago, right. Stricken
And
with multiple sclerosis for, I believe, many years, and became
yes,
a
she
spokesperson for uh, and fundraised, and
so she struggled with that for over 20 years.
I yeah, but never. I mean, I think never lost her connection with the fans. People loved her. It just had great affection for Annette, whether it was the Mouseketeer Annette, or whether it was the beach party Annette, or whether it was the Choosy Moms Choose Jif Annette. And she was the spokeswoman for Jif peanut butter for a decade. People loved her. Felt she was very approachable, and she's a big part of this story, of this
uh,
song.
I just maybe to round this out, the quote from Anka upon her death, kind of his little obituary take. Quote, Annette was a star from the time she was 12 years old, and I met her shortly after. In addition to her talent, she was self-possessed, determined, had incredible integrity, and was loved by everyone.
Yeah.
When life threw her a terrible curve, she showed the best side of herself by coming forward to discuss her MS with courage and candor. As much as she entertained us as a young woman, she gave so much more by sharing her experience and raising awareness of this disease. She was kind and intelligent, and she will be missed by her family and her wide circle of friends, in which I was lucky to be included.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. That's those are nice words, and I think a nice way to end this. And so, Puppy Love, one of many songs that we're going to talk about over um, the course of this series. And so, if you have any interest in a song that you'd like to see us explore, go ahead and put that in the comments.
Love to see
And
it.
Dave, why don't you take us home?
Sure. If you enjoyed this video, and we hope you did, you can subscribe right here or give us a like. Always appreciated. You can check out another episode of Song Stories right up there, and check out the playlist. Some interesting stuff. Good songs from the late 50s and 1960s.
That's right.
So check it out.
Absolutely. So we will see you soon. Bye
Until
bye
next
now.
time. Bye-bye.